We're also not saying just to give up. We are opposed to people quitting on their relationships without overturning every stone.
Your ability to listen is the cornerstone of intimacy.
So thanks for joining me, Thom. Love having you here. Lots of conversations we're doing today for all of our viewers. And relationship seems to be at the core of the things that we work with our clients. And in relationship, we all want a sense of closeness. We want a sense of intimacy. And there seems to be a struggle to define what is intimacy. So I'm going to open it up for you, Thom, on that one. What is intimacy? And how can you get intimacy with the people that you care for most?
I have to say how I define relationships, since I'm in a relationship with Stacy, since I'm in a relationship with Garrett, Autumn, Chance, my 3 kids, those are the primary relationships that I'm in. As you look at your life, you have your primary relationships outside of work, unless you're single, and then there's another discussion about that. How do I relate to Stacy? Before you talk about intimacy, you got to figure out how the hell you relate to another human being. And what I'll tell you, the travesty is how I feel about Stacy. That's not how I relate to her. I've got to figure out what Stacy, and she's got to figure out what Thom is committed to in our lives. Like, what am I committed to regarding my health? What am I committed to learning this week? What am I committed to accomplishing at work? And if you're a stay-at-home mom, your work is raising a family. So what is Stacy committed to? Once I figure out what Stacy's committed to in her life, and she figures out what I'm committed to, what we have found works regarding intimacy and how I look at intimacy is my ability and Stacy's ability to listen to each other until the other person has said everything they want to say. If you've never gotten there with somebody, I recommend shutting the doors and getting to a place where you're so interested in listening to the other person's life and what they do and what they're talking about. If you've never been there, it's the greatest place in the world. Your ability to listen is the cornerstone of intimacy. It literally is. And what we, Stacy and I have found, and what I've done with clients, even in the SEAL teams, great people listen so that everything is said before there's any action that you can take. Like, if I don't listen to Stacy, I don't hear something that is more, like I call it the 11th hour thing. If Stacy hasn't gotten to the 11th hour conversation that is, hey, Thom, the reason why I don't want to cut the grass is, gosh, if I tell her to cut the grass before I hear that, we're doomed. If I hear it, then our connection grows closer and closer and closer. So how I first approach intimacy with another human being is turn off all my evaluatory processes and all my judgment and listen and listen and listen. Hey, by the way, you'll never get to intimacy if you don't have time to listen. Do you know what I mean?
I do. Everybody seems to be in a rush, and we lead busy lives, and intimacy isn't something you can snap your fingers and create. It's a time component where the other person has to feel heard. They have to feel one with you. They have to also get a sense of your interest in them and not just what they can get out of it. You know, intimacy comes as well from being able to share the things with the person in your life that they could harshly judge you for, and having the experience of them not doing so and figuring out, how can we overcome this if there's something to overcome, or where do you want to go with this? But them being one with you instead of them judging you, which is very oppositional. And it's an easy thing for us to fall into, right? We're making judgment calls every day all day, all the time. These things happen naturally and normally, and they're what keep us safe. We profile our circumstances, our surroundings, and the people we encounter all the time. If you're not doing that, you're stupid. Mm-hmm. But let me tell you, you do that with somebody with whom you want to share some intimacy, and you're going to find yourself very alone. You have to allow somebody to truly be themselves around you and not judge them. And when you do that, it opens up a world of possibilities for the things you can share together, the things you can create together, and the things that you can overcome together.
How do people look towards intimacy before they get the framework of relationship? And one thing that you can do is I don't know who wrote it, the 7 love languages?
5.
5? To me, there's fucking 7. Okay, I created 2 more. So love languages are how you act on and create intimacy under the context that's in the background, is that you're related to the other person.
Well, and it's based upon what the other person wants to hear, wants to be on the receiving end of, in terms of what makes them feel loved. It's not what you want to do. It's what the other person wants to get.
It's the craziest. For 10 years, I've been training executives, and love languages have been a part of the training. And, they read the book, we converse on it. Stacy and I talk about it. And then that's understanding love languages and what's the impact of them. And then I had to have a psychiatrist understand it to me. I didn't understand that. Obviously it makes sense that physical touch creates dopamine and oxytocin and other sexual tensions. It's clear. But what the psychiatrist explained to me is that the other 4 love languages do the exact same thing for the person that has that as a love language, like
acts of service, words of affirmation.
So men, here's the deal. I'm going to give you a gold nugget here. If your wife really is endeared to acts of service, like cleaning the kitchen, cleaning up your fucking socks, cleaning the bathroom, what y'all need to understand is it's the same as if she got value from touching. Her body reacts the same when she feels served. Oxytocin gets boosted, hormones get boosted, all that relative intimacy that comes out of actuating a love language, if that's their true love language. Like words of affirmation. To me, I fight words of affirmation until they get, like Stacy grabs me and says something that's affirmative like that. And then I respond that way as if she's being very physically intimate. And my body does exactly the same thing. So those love languages are how you act on intimacy and create intimacy.
Yeah, and when those pieces of the other person getting their needs met are put in place, the physical sexual intimacy is 10 times more available. So the more that people fight doing for the other person and creating the conditions where that can happen, the longer the holdout and the longer the wait, whether it's a man or a woman. It's not a one-way street here. A man needs to have his needs of intimacy met before he's going to be able to be with you physically or sexually, or have any interest in doing the things that are on your bucket list that as a woman are the things that make you feel close and one and give you the desire to share sexual intimacy or any other kind. I mean, intimacy isn't just, hot, great sex. I mean, we all love that, right? But what we're talking about is creating the condition of oneness between yourself and your significant other.
Yeah, it's not a small matter. You men and women look into that and be authentic about it. Like, don't put, hey, I like words of affirmation, but don't. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Have it be something that when it's real, genuinely given and received, it moves you to tears. To be actively turned on by the other person, it has to be legitimate. not a small thing.
Yeah, you can't fake it.
It's not artificial either. Mm-mm. You can't replace it with something else.
And you know what? Having those conversations about this doesn't work for me and it feels fake, it feels phony, they're stilted and they're difficult, but they're worth having. They'll also show you the person in your life, if they're committed to creating intimacy with you by being willing to change their course or do something different or pivot slightly or continue to explore that conversation and ask you, okay, well, what will work? And not be immediately pissed off or discouraged about things.
Well, what we just discussed was the easy side of that. The question that always comes up onto the table, so to speak, is, well, what happens when she won't listen or he won't listen? Now at 55 years old, I will say something. Here's the truth. Stay committed to that process of listening, building intimacy, being authentic. If the man doesn't come to the table eventually, here's what I say. Fucking leave.
Well, if you're speaking to somebody and they're not listening, stop talking. Mm-hmm. Just stop talking. Even that small piece, it's a little bit of one of my favorite tools called the art of the takeaway. And one of the really small but not insignificant ways that you see it happen in society is, you're having a conversation with somebody and they're on their phone, they're doing whatever. I stop talking until they put their phone down. And so the same thing holds true in an intimate relationship or a relationship where you want intimacy, you want oneness. If they're not listening, stop talking and then see what they do. 100%. If they pursue and say, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, proceed. And if they are totally unaffected, cut bait, run.
Yeah, most people deteriorate the foundation of relationship by trying to do something it doesn't work out, and then letting that thing that's not working out perpetuate.
Yeah.
So if Stacy's not reacting to me, maybe give it some time, but stay on point. Still try to be reactive, still try to be responsible. Don't abdicate my throne as a man to, well, if Stacy's not going to be her best self, then I'm going to be a douchewagon too. So keep being on point in your life. And literally, it's just now 40 years of dealing with this conversation of how do you have a great life. If it's not working and you're doing the best you can and the other person's not coming to the table, be clear if they don't come to the table, you are out.
Yeah, they don't want you.
And you're making them worse too. Or they don't want the
relationship. Too. Yeah, yeah.
And take it away. So if you're not going to come to the table, I've done all this effort and you've done squat, we're going to exit stage right. And as bad as that is biblically and financially, at the end of it, if you find access to your best self and your husband or wife finds access to the new person in your life, becomes better because you don't play half, life will be demonstrably the best it could ever be.
Yeah, we're also not saying just to give up. We're not saying just to quit. Like, oh, it didn't work out, so I'm done. We're filing or whatever. I'm, walking away. I'm talking more in relationships that aren't completely committed. I'm not talking about a husband and a wife and, 10, 15 years of marriage and, oh, I tried and he didn't respond, so I'm going to, bolt. That's not exactly what we're talking about. We are opposed to people quitting on their relationships without overturning every stone. That's not what we're discussing. This is creating intimacy in those relationships, but you cannot continue to make yourself vulnerable and put effort forward if there's not going to be a response.
Yeah, it's usually clear that the other person's not coming to the table.
Yeah.
It could be 5 years, 10 years. It could be a series of weeks that they are their worst self and they're expecting you to be your better self. And it's just not an equal gathering, so to speak.
Well, that's
never clear, but I'm not,
It's an interesting and sticky topic, and we definitely are going to be revisiting this, and we would love to hear from you what sort of questions you have. And what it would be helpful for us to discuss on this subject in our future